So I arrived to Mountain Home Air Force Base in August 2015. I just finished a basic qualification course that lasted about a year long out at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. I was at my very first operational squadron, and this is where you kind of actually get to do the JOB. So I'd spent the last 2 to 3 years through the training pipeline, and this was kind of like my first operational assignment in the first place where I was actually going to get to drop some bombs. So I was pretty excited. So spending those first 3 months, learned a lot of awesome things about the jet, became really tactically relevant. I was getting excited for a deployment that we would be having coming up in less than a year. So deployment was going to be happening there in October of 2016. And prior to that, I was able to get my first actual job in the squadron, which was the director of mission planning. So this job was not a typical job for a pilot per se. It dealt with a lot of the mission planning specifics, and it was previously a very WISA-centric job. So getting into the job, I was already a little bit nervous in the fact that I wasn't sure if I had the proper tool set to accomplish that. But getting into the shop was actually a godsend because it allowed me to learn a lot of the different basics of the mission planning system and software that the F-15 Strike Eagle utilizes. So looking forward to gaining some knowledge in that into the deployment. So arriving in the country there in October of 2016 as a young wingman, I felt like I had a lot on my shoulders, especially with the director of mission planning, and it was a job that I was still relatively new at. But I wanted to actually take that job and try to make my squadron better and hopefully the Air Force better in the long term. So what I found is that our previous techniques is we had mission carts. They're actually these big, huge containers that had almost zero memory on them, but they were what we would load up all of our maps for the AOR. So I'd load those up, we'd put those into the jet, and then the air crew, when airborne, could actually use those maps to find what kill container that they'd be going to that day. That was very useful for the air crew based on typically when we would get a mission, they would clear us to a certain kill container. So maybe over top of Mosul, that'd be like 92 Alpha Kilo. That would be our working airspace today. Well, in regards to the mission container and the actual maps, we also had a smart book, and the smart book is what we would use, and it was a very big, cumbersome thing, big paper product that we'd have to update all the time. We'd actually have to take that, go to the kill container, start working out our data for what frequencies we'd be talking on, which gas we would need to either make it all the way home or the nearest divert from that base. So I was able to take an old tool, which was the mission cart and the map system, and I was able to update that to something a little bit more useful. So anytime an aircrew would latch a kill container in our jet via some HOTAS, at the very bottom of it, it would tell you which kill container you were in, but also it would have two empty areas that had frequencies in it. Those frequencies weren't used by the aircrew whatsoever. I don't even know what the purpose of those would be. So I devised a system that I could change those frequencies and I could actually just make them spell out what our bingo fuel was. So what is bingo fuel? It's a fuel that's required for us to make it back to home station without actually using a tanker. So if a aircrew would latch one of those kill containers, do the appropriate HOTAS, they would tell them one of two things. First, they would tell them how much gas they needed to get home from where they were in that specific part of the country, whether that's Syria, Iraq, or Turkey. And then secondly, they would have the nearest divert. So if we got into an emergency situation, the aircrew would then actually be able to point towards that place and make sure that they had enough gas. So maybe that was Erbil or Incirlink or some of those different areas where we typically wouldn't try to land unless it was a barn burner emergency from that. Once I actually created this system, I wanted to test it out before I put it out to all the flight leads. So we were able to load up some of the mission carts, put them into our jets. And then that night when we went and took off as Dude 11 and Dude 12, we were able to actually test out the system. So we flew around the AOR to our specific mission scenarios, but then we also started to latch the different kill boxes, command the HOTAS, and we confirmed with what I had programmed in the actual system with what was in our smart pack, and everything was matching up. So I was pretty happy with how all of that turned out. We then started passing that information on to all the other flight leads in the squadron so that they could start using that. It kind of took on slow at first. A lot of the older guys love their smart packs, love their old ways. The newer guys were like, this is awesome, I don't have to dig through the smart pack anymore. But as you saw, like everything started to evolve and everybody started to come around. And soon before you know it, even the old guys in the squadron were starting to use the actual HOTAS and the mission cart to figure out what their bingos were, and it just kind of saved everybody a little bit of time and effort In addition to all of that, once we were really relying on the system, we got rid of the portion of the Smart Pack that held all the data, which freed up a lot of space and time for me as admission planner, that I didn't have to print those things out all the time. I could quickly just update it in the computer and then continue on with my work from there. Once we were done with our 6-month deployment, we went and passed all that data back on to the next squadron that was taking over from us. They were also really quick to take on to how awesome the system was. And from what I know today, the system is still being used by every Strike Eagle squadron that is deployed over in Operation Inherent Resolve.